Well, welcome everyone. Special treat. I mean that. This is the beginning of the year, first video from the Morgan Report. As you know, I am David Morgan of themorganreport.com. But more importantly than that, Kurt Wuckert or something like that, correct my pronunciation, is with us along with John. And we are going to go down the rabbit hole even further. But what we're going to do is we're going to put some mile markers as we go through the hole. Why? Because Kurt can verify almost everything that John and I have called a conspiracy or conjecture to this point in time. And, you know, Kurt, admiration for you, what you've done, and the ability to stand tall, walk tall, and speak the truth to power, because this is the point in this tyrannical system where good men must speak out. So why don't we get some background from you, Kurt, and let John, open up his mic, and we're going to probably just bombard you with questions. I'll limit it to an hour if you can give us that much time. And again, thank you for the most important thing that we all have, and that's our time. So thank you for giving us your time, Kurt.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much. My background, I was actually a sound money guy. I like precious metals and a whole bunch of stuff. So I was a big activist. I was a Ron Paul supporter in 2008 and 2012. Yeah, I was the guy knocking on doors and going to parades and handing out pamphlets and explaining why we need to end the Fed and blah blah blah. So your audience is going to be very familiar with that conceptually. I owned a printing company that in 2012, somebody I knew came to buy posters from my company for some kind of protest in Chicago at the Daily building. And he said, "Hey, can I pay you in Bitcoin?" And I had no idea what Bitcoin was. And he said it was like internet, or it was like video game money is the way he said it. And so I said, yeah, sure, what the heck. It was a small job, so it was limited risk on my end to accept video game money for what was a small job to do. And it just flung me down the rabbit hole. I needed to figure out, like, okay, what did I just receive here? Okay, it's not issued by like a video game company. It's issued by this proof of work mechanism and this pseudonymous creator who disappeared like 2 years ago, and just all of this crazy stuff. So by 2013, I actually had started a mining company with a couple of business partners. We wanted to be involved as deeply as possible in the infrastructure. I really wanted to understand Bitcoin, and what better way to do it than to start a business in the space. So started doing stuff like that. Then the Bitcoin Civil War really kind of got kicked off right as I was really getting my feet wet. All of a sudden, it was like all this bickering about what Bitcoin's even for. And for me, it was like, well, when I was curious, I read the white paper, I read the words of Satoshi Nakamoto. I wanted to see, like, what did the creator intend for this to be? And let's start from there as a jumping off point. And then it's just been this long journey of people trying to become the gatekeepers, become the rent seekers, become the people that are in control of the new aristocracy. And I've always stood up and said, hey, sound money doesn't change, hard money doesn't change. You can't fundamentally turn gold into lead and then say, well, it's still great. So it's really informed my worldview, and I have been in the Bitcoin space basically nonstop until today. So this is 2022 now. So this is going to be my 10th year. At some point this year, it'll be my 10th year as a Bitcoiner, and it's been a heck of a journey.
Wow, that's great. That's I love, I didn't catch the Ron Paul piece. I am Ron Paul, Mr. Sound Money from the beginning. So you already had the philosophy and the basis and understanding of the problems at the Fed, the central banking situation, the fiat currency. So you were grounded from the start going into Bitcoin. I find that a really great piece of information, understanding that, knowing now, even understanding more about your positions with Bitcoin. Me, myself, my background was precious metals. In fact, my entire financial career is all precious metals, starting back and going long gold when it was a 345, 365 range after those two towers magically fell down in New York. And from there, just continued to just do a lot of research on my own, and ended up working in real estate, managing a private fund. And then once we got out of real estate, seeing that the crash was coming, we got out in time, got out early, did really well, went into the gold space. I ended up being a trader at Monex. And that's when I started hearing all the conspiracies and the news going on, what's behind, who's manipulating silver back and forth. That was 2006, 2007. moved my way into the mining stock sector, junior mining, primarily exploration mining, raising capital for mining and gold projects. And Bitcoin wasn't on the scene yet. It was pretty much, we were all like hustling, gold's going up, the dollar's going to collapse, housing's going down, collateral debt obligations bad, gold good, everything bad, gold good, silver even better. And 2009 came around, the markets just absolutely tanked. I'm sure you recall that. And that was when I think that's when people really started to say to themselves, what do we do now? People are losing their houses, they're in the street, they're homeless, and then the white paper, I believe, came out in 2009, I think it was. And I remember
Halloween 2008.
Okay, 2008.
Yep.
I remember reading about it in 2009, 2010, and that caught my attention. I thought, well, this is interesting because automatically I thought, well, this is an alternative to the fiat. Well, anything's better than the dollar, love gold and silver, but I just kind of noticed it and I thought that's pretty interesting. I don't know what that is, but just kind of glanced at it and moved along. And then I think when Bitcoin hit like between $9 and $15, I started looking at it. And I thought, okay, this Bitcoin, what's Bitcoin doing? Oh, yeah, it'd probably go 10, $15 and stop from there. It's like, because that's usually you don't see things do what Bitcoin ended up doing.
Yeah,
so as Bitcoin is building up, silver gets up to 2011 and Bitcoin's starting to catch momentum with silver, and they're running parallel worlds because I kept them on my charts. I thought this is really interesting. And then the great decoupling came, 2011, when they came in and just hammered silver into the ground, which they've always done. I've been aware of it as a trader. You're aware of it. If you're in the industry, you're trading large tranches of silver in the futures market, that this happens and it's inevitable that it's going to happen. You just don't know when. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And when that pulled back, that's when I saw decoupling, and that's what I believe is part of another series I want to do with David, is what I see an absolute conspiracy where the powers that be in the silver sector are somehow, and I've already proven this one here, they're related to some of the powers that be that worked in the Bitcoin sector, with Epstein being the nexus there, the shift there. Interesting, because the largest, that key there, that position was the position that Jamie Dimon had working with JP Morgan, having this giant silver hoard and shorting and spoofing silver. And anyone can go online, type in JP Morgan spoofing. You can see the articles on there. It's not a secret. Well, it just so happens that on the front page of the New York Times, he was listed as having a 15-year relationship with Jeffrey Epstein as his banker. And I thought, what are the odds that the guy running the silver operations and spoofing, is the banker for Jeffrey Epstein? And that's when the lights just started going off. And that's when I started digging, leading up to David Morgan I was working with. I was giving him this information for a couple of years. And I said, just bouncing it off him because I knew Dave was, the silver guy. And I kept on saying, I think there's something going on here. And I was feeding him information. He was going through it for years. And finally, one day, David just, he called me up, said, John, we need to talk. We need to talk about this. There is something here. And I thought, I said, I agree with you. I just didn't know when the time was to be when it'd come forward. But when I saw the Maxwell trial coming on, and I remembered the rumors of Reddit and $1 billion trade at $9,000 with Ghislaine on Reddit, those rumors, I didn't know what that was. You probably know much more detail there. That's one little piece I want to get to. When I saw that trade going on, and then the lead fast forward to the trial, I thought, now's the time to get this story out. And then along here, I see you on this videotape. Just blows my mind. You put everything together. It's like all the pieces of the puzzle were put together.
Sorry, but as I said, I'm the elder, so I get to interrupt. So, Kurt, I've just got one question. I'll hand it back to John. It's about a 3-part question, but now it's where you are. So I'm going to say that Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto. I believe he is, but I don't want to get into that rabbit hole. What I want to do is verify, watching some of his videos, that here's the man. And I watched several videos, but one of them more recently said that Bitcoin isn't gold, and that it's not necessarily going to 500,000, And I think you also might have alluded to the Tether connection. So I'd like you to comment on those three, and I'd also like you to verify for our audience what you think is really going on in this Tether printing mechanism.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like in the equity markets and everything else right now. It's how do we stop the number from ever going down? And this has been an experiment that's been going on for a few years now in equities. Like there has not been a losing trade across the markets in many years. And it's sorry, I got a screaming kid in the background. I don't know if you can hear him, but it is a function of being able to run the money printer at all times. And if you can control that money printer, you can control everybody because you can buy everybody off. Everybody wants more money. So if the regulator walks in the door and you can say, how's 10 million bucks sound? Like, suddenly a regulator that's making 100 to 200 grand a year, or maybe less, starts saying, you know what, this company looks really good. We're going to go ahead and give you an A+ rating, walk out the door. It's been a wonderful audit. Thank you so much. And this has been going on with Tether since the very beginning. There were some people that the moment Tether was created, this company that alleged you can deposit fiat money into a bank account that we will control, we'll give regular audits of, and we will issue this liquid token that it represents $1 and it makes it easier to trade. You can send them around on the blockchain between all of these unregulated exchanges in Asia, Africa, South America. Hey, don't worry, this one's running out of Gibraltar or the Seychelles or wherever, and everything's just fine. And that's all well and good, but the audits never happened. The money has never really been figured out. And the people behind it, when you start to look into who runs Tether, the people that are running Tether they're scammers. They're lifelong scammers. Some of these people have been involved in crazy investment schemes, or they've been involved in very weird Ponzi style businesses for many years, the entire careers in this space. And then what they did is they created what is probably the best functioning Bitcoin trading exchange is called Bitfinex. It works really well. It's beautiful. It's fun to use. The charts are fantastic. If you're a traditional trader with some serious experience, you look at Bitfinex and say, oh, okay, I recognize this. This doesn't look like the crappy Poloniex, Bittrex, and some of the other tools out there. So the fascinating thing is that, man, my kid is going wild over here, so I apologize. But the interesting thing is that they control the distribution through Bitfinex, they control the printing through Tether, and then they are also invested in the large development groups, the other infrastructure partners, the custodians. They're even invested heavily in the media of the blockchain space. And so if you look at these few venture capital firms, they all just kind of circle the wagons. They pretend it's decentralized. I've coined the term, it is decentralization theater. And they all just agree, oh no, it's all that's owned by this guy, or this one's owned by some anonymous character over here. We don't even know who owns this company. This is all well and good. But in reality, if you follow the money, it's a very small group of people that are making essentially all of the decisions. They're making all of the important decisions for the entire economy for years now in the blockchain space. So I would argue Tether, just looking at what we do know about Tether, it's like something like 90% unbacked, or it's backed by just what do they call it? Corporate paper. It's just unsecured debt against random, unknown, unaudited companies. But it just pumps, and everyone says, "Hey, this is all well and good. Everything's fine." It's like I'm looking at it as like the mortgage-backed security debacle, all the pre-2008 stuff. It's the same thing. It's like, wait, does anybody actually own any cash flowing assets or equity or anything anywhere? And the answer is, I don't know.
Well, you put it so well. I think Tether is the ultimate digital crypto shadow bank shadow of the Federal Reserve. It's what it is. It is a digitized Federal Reserve, and all the regulators looked the other way, and that's what caught my attention. It was the same thing happening in silver. It's reversed in silver. They used derivatives, fake silver paper, to suppress silver. On the other hand, with Bitcoin, while they're suppressing silver, they're using fake crypto derivatives to pump silver. And you do that for 7 years straight, you're going to have a population of people who are going to have a cult-like response to something that always gives them money nonstop, no matter what. Because
Oh yeah.
if it's against it, it must be FUD, and just
Right.
remember, Bitcoin always goes up. I said, well, that to me looks more like a psychological operation than an existing business plan with any product.
Well, and you can't even have a rational conversation about it. I will just simply say, like, oh, look, MasterCard Ventures started an incubator in Silicon Valley that owns Coinbase and Kraken and BitGo and like all the major brands. And people say, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. And it's like, hold on, like this is public information. Like none of this is, you don't have to go on the dark web. Like you can pull up Forbes or Financial Times or Bloomberg articles that will tell you MasterCard Ventures founds digital currency group, puts Larry Summers from the World Bank at the helm of the thing.
Wait
you
a
know,
second.
and,
Wait a second.
these are the advisors. What's
Is this
that?
is this the same Larry Summers who took his honeymoon on Epstein Island?
I imagine it is. It's the Larry Summers from Harvard and the Clinton administration
Okay.
and all the rest. So yeah. So and
Wow.
then you got a guy like that who is he is a board chairman or something over at Digital Currency Group. He's a major advisor, and he's incubating all of these brands. If you name the top 50 most important brands in the Bitcoin economy, Larry Summers is one of the guys who's steering the ship, along with guys from Bain Capital and Silver Lake and a couple of, you got the Andreessen Horowitzes and all these people that just decide, okay, this is what the economy is going to look like for the next 12 to 18 months. And then it's all funded by, the Federal Reserve is bad enough that they can just print. We don't know what's there. We don't know how much we don't know what they're doing. But then imagine like taking that and whatever exponential problem is created by the issuance of Tether by saying, okay, let's say we have $1. Let's issue $1,000 on that dollar. So the dollar is already not actually backed by anything. And then you are creating tokens that extrapolate that out. You create a derivative of a derivative that is, and then you pump it and then you're all, shaking hands like, well, Bitcoin is clearly a success because look at the price and all of this. It's like, hold on. None of this is real. None of this is disruptive. First of all, like that's the real problem is they're acting like, oh, we're undermining the economy. We're breaking away. We're the separatist group of whatever special explorers into this new water we're wading out into. And it's like, absolutely not. Like you are the people cheerleading a ship that is captained entirely by the people that Bitcoin was intended to disrupt. So it's all fake. It is all smoke and mirrors. It's just very frustrating for a Bitcoiner like me who is extremely excited about the technology and sees just how easy it is to pay off people's emotions and their loyalty and their morality just with a little bit of fiat currency.
Yeah, I think that cuts across too, because I mean, you really cover it well there. I mean, you fill up all the spaces that I did work on. I mean, this just comes together so well. And to take it the next level farther, all these promoters who suddenly came out of nowhere that have all these YouTube millions of followers, and it was always the same thing, and everyone's working the same trip. Everyone became a technical trader because there was no earnings, no products, no revenues. So what were you really trading? You were trading a chart that was probably painted by the people who run the entire show, because these charts are painted and they send their signals off. And at one point I had 4 screens going with 4 different YouTube screens, and I'm watching and I'm looking for the patterns. Here I was, silver was literally sent off to wander 10 years in the desert. So as I'm doing work, I have this extra time, I'm watching YouTube and I'm starting to see patterns here. And I thought, wow, where did these people come from? And then all of a sudden we had a herd of people that were completely 100% honest money, good gold and silver, suddenly flipped, after a European vacation somewhere, and all of a sudden everyone's singing the same choir, the same music, reading from the same script. And here's the interesting In your interview, you mentioned, I believe it was Cointelegraph was the only place where I found an interview where quote unquote billionaire Jeffrey Epstein was asked about the potential of Bitcoin. And he gave a summary.
Hmm.
It's not gold and it's not a currency. And and you look at that interview, it's only in one place I could find it, on Cointelegraph. And all of a sudden, here I was doing my research and working, and I'm listening to all these gold guys on YouTube. And what are they doing? They are literally reading word for word Jeffrey Epstein's script in an interview that was given in Cointelegraph back in, I think, 2016, 2017. And I thought,
Hmm.
didn't anybody do some research as to where did this, didn't anybody look in and say, where did this come from? No, no one. It's like, I can probably guess why. Probably because they were paid. You know,
Yeah.
we don't know how deep this rabbit hole goes, but I'm sure of one thing. There's a trail of all this, and it's going to go back pretty far. I think Jordan Belfort had a great interview where he just absolutely destroyed Brock Pierce. I'm
Hmm.
not sure if you saw that interview, but it was just, he just destroyed him. But he talked about just some of the ramifications of Tether being such a huge scam,
Yeah.
and how the Justice Department has latitude to go back 10 years. Well, that's great if we have a real Justice Department that is interested in justice.
Right.
You know, we don't have
Right.
that right now.
No, we don't. Well, and Brock Pierce is another one. Like Brock Pierce is another globalist with probably pedophile connections. He's been accused of such more than once. NDAs signed and everything's fine. He's free, but this and that. Now he's living in, I believe he's living in the oldest Freemason lodge in the Western Hemisphere. I believe it's the Freemason Lodge of Puerto Rico is now his home. And he's there just being Brock. Everything's fine, like, hey, let's talk about Tether, and let's talk about like why Bitcoin's disruptive. But that's not an uncommon story. You get these old influencer guys, or even Max Kaiser's another one. Max Kaiser was a big silver guy 20 years ago, and now he's Mr. BTC, can't ever go down, and here's why. And it's the same shtick from a lot of these people who are like, okay, I am going to be an investment influencer, and because I'm being paid anyways, and if we are all being paid to be the voice of influence here, then we just get retail buyers to buy up. We get some real fiat currency in by getting people to buy at Coinbase and things like that. But then you can create the pumps out of Tether when you want, and then you sell them back to retail, and you launder the money back out and say, oh yeah, here, this all makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, you're certainly not going to get to our people in Singapore, who's actually a shell company that's based out of this company and that company and this one, and it's just shell after shell after shell company. And then you get to the point where it's like, I don't know, we all got rich anyways. And that's when it actually gets its own legs. Like I get harassed on a daily basis across Twitter by people who I think are genuinely real people. I believe there are the sock puppets and stuff like that, but there are real people who look at me and say, Kurt, I took $1,000 and I turned it into 50 grand in a year. And to me, like, I don't care about anything else. And that's the attitude they come at it with. And I'm the guy trying to tell them that their wealth isn't real. And so then I'm the bad guy, right? It's like the zombies just decide, like, you know what, we need to attack this new thing that is threatening our wealth or whatever. And it's just super hard. It's super hard to get through to people when they've become rich off of the scam. It's like anything else. It's like people that think maybe well, my congressman's a good person. It's like, I don't think so.
If I might.
Right. Yeah, I know they brought you cookies and they they shook your hand at a parade, but they're not really a good person, and I'm sorry.
I'd like to go ahead and interject there, Kurt. This comes from the Morgan report I just published. It's contrasting real money and the crypto sphere. First, I'd like to remind everybody that we were basically on a worldwide silver standard from 3000 BC through 1873, more or less. So it's not a 100-year deal. It's 1,000, thousands. It's like 4,000 years. And it wasn't a perfect system. That doesn't exist in the human experience. But if money is power, which I've claimed forever, and you can control the money, that gives you the power to control people. generally speaking. Some people can't be bought, most can. So anyway, I'm getting a little digression here. I want to go right to the point. So I'm going to read you the published Morgan report that came out yesterday. And I'd like your comment on it first. And then I want John to lay it on the line what his famous saying is about wind, silver this, and Bitcoin that. But I'll save that, and you could take up the follow-up question, John. So here goes. The maximum silver inventory held in the United States was approximately 6 billion ounces in November of 1942. A dollar is defined as a weight of 999 fine silver, and it's about 0.77 troy ounces, which is a roughly $8 billion. When I use the word dollars, I'm talking silver dollars here. If we do a thought experiment and talk about a silver billionaire, it would mean 1 billion in silver dollars, and there would be about 8 billion in the world. This would not change greatly from 1942, and actually would be less now due to the amount of silver used up in industry. For the record, there are 2,755 billionaires in the world at present, according to Google. There can be many more as the fiat frenzy continues. But in terms of a silver standard, there at present would be less than 5 perhaps. Of course, we all understand in terms of a fiat silver billionaire, in US terms, it would be about 25 billion. But this misses the point, because in a sound monetary system, money maintains its value over decades. And if I took the top 5 cryptos and I looked at their market cap and I divided that by the market cap of silver, and in theory, we have 60 years of silver total annual production globally that can be bought with the top 5, 60 years worth. So you can comment on that, Kurt. You know, what's real, what isn't real? I used to sign off all my videos with be real, get real, buy real. Am I out of my mind, or is there something to that? Now, one more comment, and that is the fact that Bitcoin can only have 21 million. I appreciate that, but 1,000-ounce bars of silver, which is 25,000, and Bitcoin's probably double that right now, roughly. There's only 2 million, 1/10 the amount of potential Bitcoin that could be mined. There's 1/10 that amount in a product that is the most important in today's high-tech sector, and yet it sits there and languishes at this price. So said enough, Kurt, back to you.
I think, first of all, scarcity isn't value, right? Like people like to measure value and say, well, it's just a simple economic thing. It's you have a certain amount of demand and a certain amount of supply, and then there is a price discovery that occurs there. And that's all well and good. But as you mentioned, that silver, for example, has been absorbed heavily by the tech industry, much like gold. Like gold had a lot less value 50 years ago from the utility of industry, but the entire telecommunications, all the way through the internet, the computer boom, everything, your phone's got gold in it, and everyone's got a phone, and that wasn't a thing even 20 years ago. And so there's a big change in the way that utility actually disrupts what a commodity is or does or is for. 500 years ago, nobody knew about petroleum oil, and it wouldn't have mattered if they did. You could have been sitting on, right on top of, Texas, California, or the Persian Gulf, or wherever you're at, with oil just spewing out of the ground, and it didn't make you rich. And the reason it didn't make you rich is nobody had anything to do with it. So you have to build out this infrastructure. You actually had to disrupt the agrarian society or people, pooping out the window like they did. Somebody had to say, you know what, I'm going to create a machine, but I'm going to create plumbing first, and then we're going to do it, like all these different things. And all of a sudden it came like, you know what, we need fuel and we need lubricant for this next step in human evolution. And there's people saying, sitting over here saying, there's all this weird stuff that just, creeps out of the ground, and every once in a while I accidentally light it on fire and have a lot of trouble putting it out, like then you create this massive economy. And this is a thing that, like, people look at Bitcoin, which is fundamentally a transactional communications protocol. Like it's much like the internet in that I can send a message, I can send a message connected to money, I can send money without a message, I can create a business on a distributed ledger that nobody can stop. And that's the fundamental utility of these things. But people look at it and they say, but it's scarce, and therefore it has value, and that value can continue to go up forever. And I would argue that that is an absolute fallacy, that gold's utility and silver's utility to a similar degree is the fact that it doesn't corrode, that it is easy to mint into things that are useful as money or as a technological tool to do business. But people have taken this weird regressive step with Bitcoin and said, no, it's digital gold, and digital gold should be like something that gold never was, and it's that it's really good for sitting in a vault. And it is good at that, but the only reason you'd put it in a vault in the first place is so that you can use it to leverage into the economy at some point in the future. Like, that's the real value you're storing. It is the potential for future economic utility. And so I think the crypto economy, the blockchain economy, has almost completely lost the plot on that point. Everything is about this weird digital scarcity cult, which is it's completely enforced by a social democracy at this point. Like, BTC, Bitcoin, is not even a hard money today. The protocol changes on a regular basis based entirely on the whims of the people that control the source repo. They look at it and say, you know what? We should just change the signature mechanisms in Bitcoin. We're going to fight about it for a year, and ultimately there's going to be some fundamental change in the system, but we'll push it through in a way that people don't understand because people don't understand software. And then there you have it. But then they're out here saying, oh, Bitcoin's hard money and blah, blah, blah. And it's absolutely bonkers. I think people are insane, but we live in an insane world. We live in a world where something like, businesses that don't have any value, like a business like Tesla, for example, like, they make a pretty cool car, but they talk about all kinds of other stuff that they intend to do someday. And the vast majority of the valuation of their business is based on speculation that someday Tesla's going to do 50 million things that they don't do today. And it's crazy. It is a mad world. Elon Musk is one of the richest men in the world, based entirely on the meme that he is the most intelligent man in the world, and that's it. And so it's epidemic across everything. Like, the entire economy is completely insane today. And so all that to say, it sucks to not make money on the madness when you see people that are much dumber than you making money by being foolish. But there's a play in there somewhere. At some point, reality, the madness, the crazy economy must make its way back to the mean. I don't know when that is, but at some point, the people who are conservative and hedged and had their stuff dealt with in a way that was classically intelligent, I think, will be the people that will rule the next epoch of human evolution, frankly. But I don't know when that happens, because how could you?
Well, I have a potential scenario. With Evergrande this morning got delisted, and the rumor that 30% of the paper held by Tether is held in Evergrande, and a bunch of the investors in Evergrande are groups like BlackRock and Vanguard here. I think we're looking at a potential Lehman Brothers moment right here. If all the investors in America get blown out by Evergrande, and all of the trail, and Tether gets exposed, they have got to basically pull down their pants and show their books. What do they really have here? I think we're going to see a large effect on the crypto community. And if there was a Senate subcommittee that did an investigation on the volume from Tether on Bitcoin, and what they found was that at times up to 90% of the volume at Bitcoin was created by Tether, using their exchanges as little manipulators, creating the trade. Of course, now what is a retail kid, trader, anyone sit at home? COVID shows up, can't go out. Here's some PPM money. Here's some COVID money. Here's some unemployment money, and here's a poll. I think it was not Deutsche Bank. The other, I'll come up with it later. One of the banks big European bank did a poll, and they asked people on unemployment, what are they doing with their money? And of course, well, Bitcoin's just raging, and 85% said they're going into crypto. And I thought, well, let's see. You got COVID, you're stuck at home. You got an internet, you got a connection, you can be a trader. Everyone's making money on Bitcoin. And literally, I looked, I said, why do I see an electronic vacuum cleaner here just sucking money into the system, and they're laundering, and that money's coming out somewhere. Someone's getting that money. And when you see a number like 65, 85% of people putting their unemployment into crypto, it's like, this is by design. This to me, I mean, me personally, I don't believe that this is just random. I believe it's absolutely by design. Everyone's sitting at home, they're bored, they don't have a job. You don't have a job, you don't have a job. They shut down businesses, and everyone's just stuck at home. And so for the last, what, especially what has happened with Bitcoin in the last, if you look at a chart on Bitcoin, when COVID started, let's say the fourth quarter, you look like, well, where did this money come from? It's printing, they're printing it. And we, like you said, we don't know where the money's going from the Federal Reserve. Where are they sending it to? To this hedge fund, reverse repo? What are they doing with it? Are they jamming it into Tether, jamming it into Bitcoin all to paint the charts? These guys are good traders. They know how to work these charts here. Oh, by the way, hodl, hold on for dear life. Why? Goes, because we're selling. You hold that bid, my friend. Anyhow.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. Those are the red flags that you see when the influencers are all telling you like, this is just the beginning. It's different this time. Like, you need to hold on. Like, that's the, oh man. I'm actually, one of the things I like to say on Twitter quite often, I see these tweets, you get Paris Hilton or somebody saying, I just minted an NFT on Ethereum. Like, I always retweet it and I always say, top is in, that's it. and that's how people need to treat this, is that, we're not going mainstream. We're not going mainstream with the technology until the technology starts to actually do something that the current kings of the economy are not doing. And so I'm well known as a BSV advocate. And the reason I'm a BSV advocate, it is the only blockchain where the price in fiat currency terms is relatively stable. It has not been privy to big pumps. It didn't go from $50 to 50 grand in a year or anything like that. So it's not in a weird asset bubble itself. But what it actually does is there are companies that are built on it that are doing things that cannot be built without the underlying technology that exists in BSV. And so I look at that as a fundamentals trader, as a value investor, and I look at that and say, everybody thinks that this coin's value is not going to go up because it hasn't gone up in the past. They're just looking at, well, it's underperformed the market and therefore it's bad. But then I look at all the businesses, every week, frankly, there's a new company saying, hey, we tried to build our thing on Ethereum. Ethereum couldn't handle what we wanted it to do. We did a little bit of research. BSV is the only blockchain that does what it says it can do, or what any blockchain says a blockchain can do, and therefore we're moving there. And then you look at that and say, okay, this might actually disrupt the economy in some way. And it's at that point when you start to get the like, maybe like we're this hedge fund that owns part of Twitter and part of some of these other things, and start saying, hey guys, can we'd like to invest in your startup or something. And then that's what I think really matters, when you start to see the startups in a blockchain economy be the things that get funded, be the things that get bought, instead of buying just the protocol token, because there's really not a reason for the protocol token across almost any of the crypto ecosystem. Like, you buy Ether or Solana or any XRP, for example. Like, Ripple, the company, is a fantastic business model, but the XRP token is irrelevant. Like, there's not a reason for it, unless the whole reason is to lie about the business model to pump the token valuation. And so,
That's a great segment. I'm going to take this one, John. Excuse me. So I want to go on a little bit on a philosophical ride with you, and this is specific to BSV, the way I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kurt. So my good friend Rick Mayberry writes Early Warning Report, and I think when you can get a concept written simply, it's called elegance. So here's Rick's basic premise, and I think this applies to BSV, but you're on my show for a reason. So Rick says that an economic system is a result of its legal system. It begins with two fundamental principles from English common law. One, do all you have agreed to do. And two, do not encroach on other persons or their property. The first rule is the basis of all contract law, and the second, the basis of tort law or called criminal law. These are the two laws taught by all religions, which is why they were the basis of common law common to all. Now, my little ad is that I think that was kind of the philosophical start of Bitcoin. You had an immutable ledger, do everything you said you're going to do, and it's there for everybody to see transparently. And if you screwed up, maybe you had some type of recourse. So I want to get there because I think this thing has turned into a system where it's been hijacked, as you said, where basically MasterCard's taken over the whole thing. Everything is BTC, and the fundamental fact remains, when this thing started, I think it had a pure heart. Am I way off base, Kurt?
No, I think you're 100% right. I mean, Satoshi Nakamoto, listening to him, it's like listening to the resurgence of Adam Smith in the technology era. And of course, everybody argued with him. Everybody said, oh no, here's why you don't get it. Here's why Bitcoin doesn't work. And it's funny because the people that argued with Satoshi on day one ended up being the people that controlled Bitcoin after Satoshi left. Like Satoshi was essentially trolled and bullied out of his own invention, which we've seen across all of history with great inventors. Like they come up with something that's fantastic, and then a bunch of jerks show up and say, okay, look, we're gonna just wreck it. Basically, we're gonna take a little nugget of the thing and we're gonna make a ton of money on it, and we're gonna erase you from history because we don't want you suing us at some point in the future. And so we've seen exactly that with Bitcoin. Like Satoshi Nakamoto talked about, I mean, everything from like deploying email on top of Bitcoin to tokenizing all kinds of economies and internet commerce. Even if you read the Bitcoin white paper, the opening line of the intro, so there's the abstract and then the intro, he writes, it's commerce on the internet is the opening three words. And people talk about it and say, oh, Bitcoin's not for spending. You shouldn't be transacting it. It's like, what do you think commerce on the internet entails? Like he goes on to explain why the fees are too high in centralized payment processors, which is in 2008, it's basically credit cards and PayPal. Like that was all that existed. And so he looked at it and said, we need to undercut their fees so we can disrupt, so we can open up micro payment economies. And people today are like, oh, Bitcoin's not intended to be spent. The transactions should be high fee to disincentivize spending and to incentivize more hodling. And this is the antithesis of what Satoshi Nakamoto wanted to do. He wanted to empower entrepreneurs to be able to send each other a penny. There's an incredible amount of business globally that can be people transacting in pennies with each other. This is not even just in the third world where, you know, if I'm in the Philippines or Venezuela or some of these other places where like it really makes sense for me to be able to spend 20 cents on a sandwich or something, but it makes sense in the macro economy in the West, in places like the US and the EU, for doing things that are sending an email, for example. Like, you know, I'm in media. I've got 22,000 followers on Twitter. A lot of people send me DMs. If I could say, you know what, if you actually want me to read your message, send it with a nickel or a dime. That's something that disrupts my life. It makes it that I don't have to filter through all of the people that are trying to scam me. Right. You know, and that's the kind of thing that Bitcoin fundamentally allowed to occur that people say has no value. And it's like, no, that has an incredible amount of value. And it's value that is very narrowly explored. And really, it undergirds what I said earlier. I mentioned the Bitcoin Civil War. And those were the two factions. It was the people saying that, no, the ability to transact on the ledger and to secure data and to make that data more valuable because it had proof of work attached to it, or the fact that it had a microscopic fee, creates an opportunity cost for us to not waste our time with spam and all this other nonsense that we deal with in the internet era. So it's not just the simple, like, I want to buy a coffee and here's $6 for it. It's all kinds of little microscopic relationships that allow me to do business just as easily in South Korea as I can in South Carolina. And I can do them from the same desk at the same time because of Bitcoin. And people have not utilized the technology for these things. 90+% of everything that's going on is people that are trading it as if it's a stock. And then the only other thing is people using smart contracts to trade secondary tokens on top of these platforms as if they're valuable. This is NFT trading and DeFi and all this stuff that they say, well, that's the real disruption. It's like, no, that's just more trading on top. Like, I get that it's a thing you can do, but why won't anybody start a business anymore? Like, this is what actually worries me, is that people look at entrepreneurship and say, nah, we can all be traders or all be on welfare. And that is not a world I want to live in at all.
This entire first of all, the basis of what you said, David, and regarding the basis of business and industry and the origination of Bitcoin, I love that topic. I watched the interview. It was very clear that there came a certain point where Satoshi was developing Bitcoin and had certain intents and goals, and it was hijacked basically by the financial globalist community. It was hijacked because it changed from there. So looking back, this is the transition that's invisible to the world. I mean, I think in this conversation we're having right now, this is like the beginning of the great crypto awakening. There's the great awakening. I'm like, this is the great crypto awakening. Well, what's the great crypto awakening? I said, well, it's waking up after 5 years and realizing that your wife is a blow up doll. You know, this is going to be an eye opener for a lot of people. You believe this? It's like a Twilight Zone movie where people, I love Twilight Zone growing up as a kid because someone, in many of these instances, someone would be, going through some experience, and all of a sudden they'd wake up and everything is just changed, and almost it's reality. It's like it wasn't what you thought it was. You were in the Twilight Zone, and that's people are going to wake up. It's going to be really difficult for people to wake up and realize that, wow, I became back in, around 2015 2021, I became a digital pump and dump token guy. Yeah, it's like, really? You and who else? That's all you did was pump and dump tokens here. So going back to your original story on Bitcoin and then BSV, I really am fascinated by BSV, the technology there. That right there, what you're doing, Kurt, that is, people say, John, you hate crypto. No, I don't. I'm a total believer. I'm 100% behind it. But you have to have good moral people behind a system that is that centralized. It must be in the hands of good moral people. And then you talk about another topic I took notes on was data integrity. And data integrity, whether it's your finances, your health, your credit, your health records, data integrity is so big. And this all gets down to, I tell people, look, if you have Bitcoin, you made a ton of money, you're at a crossroads. It's a moral decision for you, an amoral decision for you, or an immoral decision for you. That's your decision, though. You have to decide. Here's the evidence. This is where the food chain goes. It starts right here. There's no way around it. The most famous pedophile in the world is connected to Bitcoin, whether you like it or not. Your wife is a blow up doll. There's no value there. It's not real. I'm sorry. You have to wake up and realize you have to get up and make something, start a business, create something here though. So I think going back to the origins of what Dave was saying with Bitcoin here, that basis there, I don't think the public really knows that transition where someone came in and basically kicked the chair out from under you and ran off with your lunch money.
Sure. Well, and I think it's actually very simple. And people tell me I'm like this crazy conspiracy theorist. And I say, well, no, like if you have worked in business, like let's say I'm a drug company. And this is an example that's been used for 50 years to talk about corporate patent trolling and things. It's like if I have the drug that cures cancer, but it only makes me $10 a dose, well, that sucks. I am going to patent that and shelve it so I can keep selling very profitable chemotherapy to the world, right? And this is something that even, you get communists and stuff say, well, this is why the drug companies are bad. But then you have, conscious capitalists and things that say the same thing, that like, well, maybe patent laws are bad. And here's an example of why. And these are actual problems that, like, if there is a cure for cancer that costs $10, then it really sucks that people are dying of cancer after 10 months of chemotherapy, and then, well, okay, that cost $100,000 and now they're dead anyways. Like, but that's a nightmare. This is a nightmare world that we live in. And so it's the same thing. So you get Bitcoin, 2008, 2009, like, holy cow, global disruptive payments technology. Well, who's going to be threatened by that? Immediately, you get the Visas and the MasterCards and the PayPals of the world who are saying, okay, who do we buy? How do we patent it? How do we make it that we can either benefit from the technology or shelve that technology forever? That's how any business is going to think. And so, of course, you have MasterCard Ventures start to say, okay, who's developing it? Who's mining it? Who's custodying it? Who is doing the things in that economy? And how can we turn them into our employees, essentially? And so that's precisely what happened. In 2014, they helped fund the creation of Digital Currency Group. This is an incubator that still exists. And Digital Currency Group primarily focused on one major company. The major company is called Blockstream. Blockstream became the company that essentially every, not every single, but every significant Bitcoin developer worked for Blockstream from like 2015 to 2017 and 18. Everybody of note was a Blockstream guy. And so naturally, the Blockstream narrative, which is just an extension of the MasterCard narrative, essentially became the de facto Bitcoin narrative. But then there were the holdouts. There were the handful of people who said, no, I'm not interested in a Blockstream salary, or I'm not interested in a MasterCard salary. In fact, I remember being friends with Satoshi Nakamoto, and here's how Bitcoin's supposed to work. Well, those people, it's like, get them out of there. They're evil in some way. We need to cast them outside of the walls. They can't be in the forums. They can't be in the GitHub. They can't be in whatever. These are people like Gavin Andreessen, Jeff Garzik, Mike Hearn, and a handful of others. These are the people who had a relationship with Satoshi. These are people who said, I've exchanged 1,000 private messages with Satoshi Nakamoto, asking him about each of these scenarios, and he gave me an answer, and I'm willing to share his answers. And Blockstream people saying, well, we can't trust you. How do we know that's actually what Satoshi said? We understand Bitcoin. We're the professional developers of this thing. We're official. You're the rogue. You can't be trusted. We already have consensus on our ideas anyways. And so, oh, isn't that convenient? All the voters also work for the same company. And then it's just a very simple corporate takeover of what could have been basically the greatest technology in history. But that led to the splits. This is why there ended up being a Bitcoin Cash, ultimately a Bitcoin SV, and some of these other things. We're the last holdouts for people saying that, hey, maybe Satoshi Nakamoto understood Bitcoin, and maybe we should at least try to use the protocol the way the inventor said that it should be used. Like it's just bonkers to act like that he was a fool, that maybe Satoshi didn't understand his own invention. And truly, the BSV community are the only ones that are even giving it a try, to even say, hey, maybe he was right, maybe we should try what he said. And what we've created is like, oh, interesting. We're actually 5,000 times more efficient than Ethereum. We can do everything Ethereum can do, but
Amazing.
For a 10,000th of the price and at instant fees or instant settlement and all this other stuff. And people say, well, that's impossible. All these brilliant people are working on Ethereum or BTC or whatever. And it's like, yes, they're brilliant because they say they're brilliant. And then the media that are owned by the same company are telling you that they're brilliant, but their network does 15 transactions a second and ours does 100,000 transactions a second. And what are we talking about here? And
I might have a project for you. I may have a client customer that is going to be greatly interested in this, with a big plan too. This is really amazing how you can almost see where you've got this good portion goal here, original goal, and then you see this person get hijacked. And it seems to me like they've tried to hijack it and tried to force and create their own currency, turning the technology into a currency, when the reality is, it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like having this technology patented to work in an existing industry with real products, it'd be like, I remember before the fax machine, you got something overseas. We were doing work early days, I think the early 80s in China, and we didn't get faxes. We got a telex. I believe it was called a telex. It was a big printing machine plotting out. And I thought, okay, when the fax machine showed up, it was like, we have a fax machine. It's like, no, let me see, what's it look like? Now fax machine, they
Yeah.
give them away now, but
Yeah.
the fax machine changed everything though. It really changed everything. And to me, that was an example of really a modern example of technology changing industry, making it better. Someone owned the patent somewhere down the road there and issued it out and sold it, and it worked. It made business more efficient. And to me, I see Bitcoin to technology. This should have been just, hey, we'd like to use your technology. We'll, get a license and use it in our privacy, to where someone took this and literally tried to take the technology and turn it into a currency, and that's when those little coins showed up with a B on it. It says it's digital gold. Like, that's not gold, my friend. That's a picture of
Right.
something that looks gold with a B on it. It's not gold. So,
Mm.
this, to me, I think there was and part of the crypto conspiracy was, I believe as part of it, there was an absolute well-funded anti-gold propaganda arm that came out against, that was called hashtag drop gold. And you follow the money,
Yep.
and it goes right down the alley where I say, oh, well, why am I not surprised here? Why am I not surprised that it goes, to follow the money, it goes to this guy who's directly related to Epstein. So when people
Sure.
were, John, gold's going nowhere, it's like, well, because there's derivatives holding it down, and there's some people over there related to the same people promoting Bitcoin here. So you got to be
Mm.
objective and look at this. But as you said, when someone gets $1,000 and goes to 50,000, they're thinking, well, they put Bitcoin, put my kid in college, it fixed this, it fixed that. They're
Yeah.
owned. They're
Oh
gone.
yeah. Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to buy people. Well, and as far as Epstein goes too, it's this is also not some dark web conspiracy theory. You can read articles again from the New York Times, Wall Street Journal,
Yeah.
and everything. Jeffrey Epstein was laundering money through a venture firm called Digital Garage. The CEO is a guy named Joy Ito, and he was the head of the Digital Currency Initiative at MIT. And the
Boom.
DCI at MIT was paying a guy named Vladimir von der Laan, who is the single most heavy contributor to Bitcoin's code between 2011 and like 2019. So he's one of the biggest of all time. I think he's number 2 now, and just recently got passed up because he retired a little while ago. But during that era, Vladimir von der Laan was doing more coding for Bitcoin than anyone else on earth, and he was being paid directly by Jeffrey Epstein through Digital
Wow.
Garage and into the MIT Digital Currency Initiative, to the point where Joy Ito, he knew this was going on. He knew Epstein was this human trafficker and all this stuff, and he was concealing it. He was, but still bringing in this money. So you got to ask yourself, what was Jeffrey Epstein paying for with these donations? This was to the tune of
Mm.
millions of dollars. And ultimately, Joy Ito was forced to step down out of MIT and all this stuff. When Epstein finally got arrested and all this went down, it was like, okay, we got to clean house a little bit. And Joy Ito was the man who had his head roll in that situation. But everyone else, like the question that was never answered is, what was he paying for? What money was going to Vladimir von der Laan? So you have to ask, okay, what
Mm.
did Vladimir do to Bitcoin, and why would it be beneficial to Jeffrey Epstein? And so you then look at like,
Mm.
okay, what did he ever advocate for? What were the changes that he made? And it was very much turning Bitcoin into a digital gold system, something that could be run very simply in a distributed. It was the immutability of the financials. It was the nobody can confiscate my money, right? Well, obviously that's valuable to a guy like Jeffrey Epstein. And but there's so much there that really needs to be looked at. And this was headlines for whatever it was, 2 or 3 days a few years ago, and then it's just gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
You can say, yeah.
nobody's talking about it anymore. And it's
We are the
unfortunate.
media. CNN won't cover
Right.
this. CNBC will never cover this. Fox News won't cover this. Well,
Mm-hmm.
as I've been telling, there is no media. There is no journalism, I should say. There's fake
Yeah.
media, but there's no journalism out there. I mean, this is all this work, as you said, this is all mainstream media posted stuff, but no one wants to look at the entire network map. I believe there's a network map. I'm not sure if you got the link to it, called graphcommons.com, and it's got it's interactive. You go on graphcommons.com and just it's all of Epstein's network. Just type in Jeffrey Epstein's
Mm-hmm.
network, and you just be blown away. You see this map that's obviously an agency grade network map here, but it's interactive.
Interesting.
You put your cursor on any Joey Ito's name, Harvard's name, uh, uh, Bill Gates' name, or Brock Pierce's name, and it lights up their network and all their names and business. Like it is loud out in the open. I mean, if there was ever a keystone to identify all this stuff, Graph Commons would qualify as an interactive keystone of what's really going on out there in this world of crypto mania. It's layered right on top of the cabal. It really is. It literally is.
100%.
It's the same. It's two things. You look at this, like, this is a deep state project. How is it that something like this could get by all the regulators? Well, because the regulators are in on it. I'm sorry, but this is the conspiracy. And what have we learned about conspiracies? It takes 6 months from a conspiracy these days to become a fact.
Right.
You know, this is an ongoing meeting. And going back to one more step on the crypto conspiracy, and David Morgan asked me, so what do you think's happening? I tell people, I think there's an ongoing sting operation going on. There's no way this can continue going on at this pace. It can't, because eventually it's going to filter out to the people, and the entire population is going to look at all this and say, this is an absolute outrageous outlaw situation. We have absolute criminals and pedophiles running this thing, and everyone in government, either we have a third world, below grade, just criminal government running the entire world, and we're okay with it, or we're not. What's going to happen? Obviously, the only thing that can happen here, it's not going to be any federal organization, it's not going to be anything in law enforcement. The only way I see it, only a military operation is going to cure something like this. That's simply because there's so much power distributed around the world. But here's the thing, we all see it now. It's out in the open. I mean, I would challenge any media company out there to follow up on this. I run into YouTube guys that are crypto guys and Bitcoin guys. They won't even talk about this part of their things that they're pimping and promoting out there. It's like, dude, it's like it's got Jeffrey Epstein's fingerprints all over it. You don't even realize there's something called Executive Order 13818. It has not been enforced yet. If that gets enforced, if you look at the teeth at Executive Order 13818, you look at what's going on here, and you find yourself in the position, you may find yourself in a position that you really don't want to be, but you still continue on. Why? Because you can't get away from what? The idea that what I'm saying is FUD and Bitcoin's going to go up forever because it always comes back. I said, and I think that's a trap. I don't think it's an accident either. I think it's by absolute design. Why? That's how you get people hooked. It's like it's your drug. It always goes up. It pays your bills. It goes up. You're not selling it. There's nothing being sold. I compare what's happened with the second stage of Bitcoin. There's obviously two phases. Your original phase was a good phase. The globalists that took over Bitcoin, basically in the 70s, when 78, 79, 80s, Jimmy Carter was president. Silver and gold were rising. I think I was 17, 18 years old. I had my first job. I worked at a Cadillac dealership. I worked in the car wash, and I got the cars ready for all the rich guys coming in, and they would always tip me really good. It was a great job. I loved it. And one day they said to me, "Hey, Perez, we're going to have a meeting tonight, going to make some money, come bring a couple $100. I'm like, okay, and these guys they had all this gold and Rolexes, and we had all the celebrities coming in all the time from Hollywood. So he goes, we're gonna have some celebrities in there and everything. I walked in there, I thought, wow, this is just great. And it was a pyramid. Hey, we're doing $100 pyramids, $100 in, and $900 out. And I remember, I thought, okay, well, see, my car payment is Friday. I got $200. My car payment is $300. Okay, I'll do two of them. And I joined two pyramids. And it was like the next morning, I got a phone call from a complete stranger, says, come get your $900. I'm like, oh, wow, this is just wonderful. I was hooked. I was 17. I was absolutely hooked. And I think it's the same thing. To me, crypto, what they did with the whole tokens, everyone's pimping stocks, pump and dumps and everything. This is the modern pyramid in the same economic situation we were there. We were inflation, but we had 14% interest rates back then. Imagine that. People complain about 3, 4, 5%. I was paying 14% interest on my truck loan on my very first car here. So people haven't seen real inflation yet and real interest rates. So pyramid power is definitely active here, and people are hooked.
Yeah, John, I'm going to stop you there. I told Kurt we'd run for about an hour. you don't mind, I've got one question and I'll let John close this out. So it was on one of the videos, Kurt, I don't know if it was you or if it was Craig or maybe somewhere in between. I did a lot of binging, but it was the scene in The Big Short, and it was fraud never works scene. And with that as a basis, and this is my ignorance, so I'll say it in public, could we see Tether go down and BTC go, let's say, south and BSV maintain itself?
I think so. So I actually think that, you know, we're about due for a bear cycle across the whole crypto economy. It's been a few years. If you look at the, you know, people really love the macro pattern on that, and we're about ready for a bear market to really you know, happen. Maybe it'll be a sideways one, maybe it'll be a big negative. But what I think could happen is that I think BSV could outperform the bear market. And here's why. It's the only project where there is fundamental use occurring by businesses. This is not just investment. This is not MicroStrategy leaving BTC on the books instead of cash. This is, you know, companies like Twetch or companies like, you know, and any number of the startups. These are your Tonic Pows or the companies that like have clientele that need BSV in order to operate their businesses. And they're the only blockchain that has that. And so if everybody else is like, well, I don't need this asset if it's going down, so I'm gonna sell it. There's one standout saying, well, I still need to buy BSV in order to make money in my real business. And so I think that absolutely BSV could outperform essentially everybody, because that's not the kind of growth that's going to go away. If you go to a company, if you go ask a startup, like, how are you able to offer me this pricing and provide services for maybe a tenth of what I'm paying from your competitors, and you explain, oh, well, we use this really great frictionless blockchain in the background. It's kind of the plumbing of our company. And you pass that information along, and they say, what aspects of our business could we move to the BSV blockchain? And then, you know, then all of a sudden that's fundamental demand where there is not fundamental demand anywhere else. Nobody needs Ether, nobody needs XRP, nobody needs Litecoin, nobody needs Dash or Monero or anything else when they wake up in the morning. But there's an increasing number of people that need BSV in the morning to run their business that day. And that's the kind of thing that I think over time, if we're patient and we're hardworking, that snowballs into something that really matters, that it's the real value investment across the market there. So that's my thought. That's my theory on it. I have no data to back it up except to say that I believe that utility ultimately wins eventually, and that's where I'm going to leave it.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's no doubt the utility is there with BSV. If I learned anything about this entire process since watching your first video and being in this interview, is understanding, going back to the real utility of what this was designed for. And instead of taking a fax machine and turning it into a token, it turned into a license where people use the technology and it enhanced their existing business regardless of what their product was. It is the utility that you need that enhances your business. Love the idea of penny per email. I mean, that's mind bender. Sounds great right here. But anyhow, this has been a wonderful interview, and I really appreciate your time, Kurt. I mean, I sleep better at night knowing that you know what you know and you've been sharing what you know. This has been great, and David and I got maybe one or two people gave me some flack, but the truth was I didn't know anyone who was going to come to bat for Jeffrey Epstein, so I didn't expect anything back, and that's what we call it, a conspiracy. But you you have definitely confirmed that the conspiracy is likely going to become a big historical fact.
Yep.
I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it too.
Well, hopefully we'll have you back. We're just going to see how this thing unravels. I really think that all the markets are going to be in disarray sometime during this year. And I will let everybody see my message for the day.
Amen to that.
Kurt, thank you. John,
Thanks, guys.
as always. And this is David Morgan signing out for the Morgan Report.